Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Spann Report podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Spann, and this is episode number 57 of the report. Yeah, man, 57th episode, post Eric Garner episode. I'm gonna try to keep it a bit light, or at least lighter than it was the last time you guys heard from your man Spann. Man, it wasn't a good show. That wasn't a good show at all, man. I don't know what the hell happened. I honestly don't. I don't know if it was like my thoughts kept coming over me, man. I was discombobulated. I was confused and all of those things, man. But you know what? I feel a little bit better despite some of the news that we've gotten over the last couple of days as in regards to Eric Garner and the lack of indictments that have come there. And we're going to talk about that on this particular episode. We're going to talk about the reactions that a lot of folks have been giving when it comes to these particular instances of police overstepping their bounds when it comes to the amount of authority that they have, man. Or not even, I guess even now we can't even say that they're overstepping their bounds because they've been given the authority to go about the business as usual, so to speak. So yeah, man, I'm going to talk about that on this particular episode, which is why this episode will be called Salt in the Wounds, man. This is definitely some salt in the wounds being thrown, considering the fact that we've had two cases now where police have used excessive force on unarmed black males and yeah, got away scot-free with doing the shit. So we're going to talk a bit about that, man. But before we get into that, before we get into all of that, man, gotta let you know, we gotta get the business out of the way first. Gotta let you guys know how to get in touch with me here at the Spann Report. Let your voice be heard, man. So for those of you who want to leave a voicemail, you call the hotline at area code 313-288-0485. That's area code 313-288-0485. Leave me those voicemail messages. I promise I will get to your messages and I will play them on the show. As of right now, I can't play them live. So what I will do is I will respond to those on the podcast. You may not hear them on the live shows, but you will hear them on the podcast as I reply to those here on the show. Also, you can call me you can hit me up on the email. The email to the show is feedback@thespannreport.com. That's feedback@thespannreport.com. Send me all of your messages. Send me anything you want to talk about, anything that I've said on the show, anything you want to let me know. You had any questions that you want to ask me here on the show. You want to respond to anything that I've said here on the show. You can hit me up in the feedback@thespannreport.com. That is the email to send everything to. You can also hit me up, chop it up with me on Instagram and on Twitter. My name on Instagram and Twitter is Mr._Spann, pretty much the same as it is everywhere. It's on Xbox Live is Mr. Spann37, and on PlayStation Network is Mr._Spann37. So yeah, it's pretty much Mr. Spann across the board. It's same everywhere, man. Same everywhere. And if you want everything Spann Report related, man, you can go to the SpannReport.com. That's where you find all the podcasts, all the videos to the podcast, all of the guest appearances that I've had on other shows, man. Go to the SpannReport.com. Leave your comments there. Everything Spann Report related pretty much is there at the SpannReport.com. And for those of you listening, get the word, help your man Spann out here a little bit, just a little bit. For those who may be listening on Podomatic, understand that I've stopped uploading shows on Podomatic. I no longer use Podomatic in order to distribute the podcast anymore. So if you have if there are any episodes that the Spann Report has been putting out, like what happened to Spann, man, it's been a couple weeks, it's been a few weeks since this nigga stopped putting out shows. Like, no, it's not like that. I no longer use Podomatic. They no longer distribute the podcast. The Spann Report podcast is distributed solely by me now. All right. So for those of you who have friends who may be wondering where the new episodes are, they'd have to resubscribe, especially on iTunes. They'd have to resubscribe to the show on iTunes in order to listen to the SpannReport.com. And I'll probably put up some instructions and stuff like that, or even an instructional podcast on Podomatic in order for those who haven't gotten the word as of yet, man. But yeah, man, it's been an interesting week. It's been a very interesting week. And like I said, man, I was in my feelings. I was in my feelings, so to speak, when I was talking about what happened to Mike Brown. You know, I spoke about an incident that happened to me when I was a young kid. Man, I was 12 years old when I had my first gun pulled on me, and it was by the police. Uh, and of course, you guys know I've been arrested before. You know, very thinking back on it, so lucky to have had that situation work out in the way that it did. You know, it could have been way worse. It could have been, you know, it's one of those things where you feel like it could have been you. And so yeah, man, just thinking about those types of things, man, just like it just kind of had me in my feelings, so to speak. And yeah, like I said, it showed in that podcast, man. That was not my best show at all. I was I was a bit perturbed by that show. As a matter of fact, I didn't even want to. I really didn't even want to distribute that at all. But it was real. It was honest. It was how I felt. It was how I felt at the time. And so yeah, man. But we're gonna talk. We're gonna talk about these cases and the react to these cases on this show, man. And one of the first things that I kind of wanted to address was the St. Louis Rams. Right, there were some players on the St. Louis Rams who came out pregame, hands up, don't shoot gesture. And we had the St. Louis Police Association. I don't even have this dude's name. Honestly, I don't give a fuck what his name is. We had this guy come out and he demanded an apology from not only the St. Louis Rams, but from the NFL. He demanded an apology from those players for the hands up, don't shoot gesture. Okay. And for once, the NFL got it right when it came to whether or not to administer punishment or whether or not to administer any fines or anything. For once, the NFL got it right this time by not putting out any sort of disciplinary action for those players. And I say they got it right this time only because, like, you have to understand, and this is the thing that really pissed me off about the entire thing, was the fact that, okay, we have this thing, we have this case come before us where the grand jury declined to indict Darren Wilson. Now, them declining to indict Darren Wilson does not mean that Darren Wilson did nothing wrong. And unfortunately, quite a few people have this belief in their head that because Darren Wilson, or that the grand jury in Ferguson declined to indict Darren Wilson, that nothing was done wrong in that particular case. And they want us to just say, you know, just wash our hands of it. Like, see, these are the facts. You know, they had all the facts. We didn't have all of these facts, and they went through all of these things. There were so many different things wrong with that entire process that folks called out before the process even started. But, you know, again, you know, you have these instances of folks wanting to basically wash their hands of it. They're tired of dealing with it, so to speak. They're tired of dealing with folks talking about it, so to speak. And so you have this instance where these players, they come out, and they and it's interesting to me that this gesture is one of solidarity, right? So we have this entire movement. We have this entire movement around the country where people are finally standing up in unison. And it isn't just black folks, it's white folks, it's Latinos, it's Asians. It's a melting pot, the way that America is supposed to be, right? It's a melting pot of people who are finally standing up together to say that these type of actions, these types of overstepping of bounds, these types of abuses of authority won't be tolerated. And we're tired of dealing with it. We're tired of hearing about it, and some changes need to occur, right? And so this is what this symbol is starting to mean now. This is what this means now, that we're not going to deal with this anymore. We're standing in solidarity with those who sympathize with those who have been abused or their lives taken away from them due to the overstepping of bounds by the police. Okay. And so for the police, who, you know, for all intents and purposes, have just kind of skated on the fact that they just killed an unarmed citizen, to ask for an apology from those who are doing nothing. They aren't, you know, committing any crime. They aren't flipping anybody off. They aren't cursing anybody out. They aren't doing any of these things. It's just a show of solidarity. This is a show of solidarity. This is all they're doing. They came out on the football game and did that. This also means touchdown. Ironically enough, right? It also means touchdown. So there's a show of solidarity that these players are expressing with the protesters in Ferguson. And you can even link this now to an Eric Garner or, take for instance, Oscar Grant, Amadou Diallo, Ayanna Jones, Fred Hampton, and Mark Clark. Like all of these names of people who have been killed unarmed by the police, right? So you have these players come out with this gesture. And now you have these reactions to the people, you have these reactions to folks who are pissed off at these players, for expressing a sense of solidarity with the protesters of the people who are just sick and tired of being gunned down by the police. They're sick and tired of people being abused by the police. And you have these people who have this visceral reaction to say that the NFL should fine them, that the NFL should suspend them guys for some games, that this should cost these guys some money. Meanwhile, Darren Wilson shoots down an unarmed kid. His kill shot was from over 150 feet away, and people send money to him. In what was that, ABC? I don't know how true it is that that ABC actually paid Darren Wilson $500,000 for that interview, but you think about it, folks donated money all summer to Darren Wilson for shooting a young black kid. And we can say you can try to misconstrue it, or you can try to steer it a certain way. We've seen the comments of those who were donating those monies. We've seen the comments. We saw that. So you can't even deny what was going on there. A lot of folks were just like, hey, you took off another one. You took another one off of the streets, right? This is what what folks were saying while they were donating money to this guy, right? So you have this visceral reaction of, people wanting to, they want the NFL to suspend these guys. They want the NFL to take money out of these guys' pockets, all for showing the sign of solidarity. This is it. This is it right here, right? So, I listen to morning radio in the morning. I listen to sports talk radio a lot in the morning. And sometimes sports talk devolves into talking about social issues, the big news of the day, the thing that has everybody talking. Sometimes I listen. And I was listening to, what was that, 97 Won the Ticket. Sarah, Bill, and Stoney in the morning, right? I was listening to them. And, a lot of times I'm listening, I'm texting, because you have the ability to text your response to what it is that they're saying on the show. And I don't really have time, dedicated to where I can, sit on hold and wait for them to get to my call if I was to call in or whatever. So I'll text a really quick response to something that they say. And, it was interesting. One of the hosts, I think it was Bill, went on to say that, basically that the evidence showed that Mike Brown was his gun, and that basically that Darren Wilson's station showed that. And again, we can talk all day long about the inconsistencies as to how the prosecuting attorney went about that entire process. We could talk about all the missteps. We could talk about all of the the portion of where they gave them the entirely wrong law in which to look at as far as like the grand jurors. They gave them the wrong law that had been unconstitutional since 1985. We can talk about that. But, of course, this is talk radio. It's in the morning. I don't have that kind of time. So I'm basically just saying that, look, my perspective was, look, man, you're on the radio. You're on, you're basically disseminating this information, and a lot of this information that you're telling these folks is wrong, right? Mike Brown wasn't killed in the car because, even if there was a fight amongst Mike Brown and Darren Wilson, Mike Brown wasn't killed in the car. Mike Brown was killed from over 150 feet away. He did not present an immediate threat to Darren Wilson that warranted his life be taken at that particular moment in time. Now, we weren't there. I wasn't there. He wasn't there. And everybody can say you weren't there, but the forensics shows that. The accounts of plenty of witnesses in that case show that. So, just briefly in that text message is saying that, it's interesting that folks would believe that. It's interesting how folks would believe that because there's crime. That's what it was. I'm sorry. I'm veering off. The thing that set me off to make me want to tweet that or text them was that they were talking about black on black crime, right? Because there's so much crime going on in the black community that it warrants you know, the fact that we have these police over, you know, we have police who are overly aggressive and they can't be sure because of the overwhelming crime that's going on in these communities that they police. But the only homicide that had been executed in the city of Ferguson that year had been Mike Brown. And we're talking about this overabundance of criminality in the neighborhoods that they're policing. The only homicide was the victim in this sense, the man who has no ability to speak for himself in this particular moment of time, the one who's been vilified and criminalized posthumously. I don't even know if I'm saying that word right. Posthumously, I think that's it. Right? So I'm texting the show, and it's interesting. Like, normally when you text a radio station or whatever, you get like this, it's not a text that you respond to. It's more like a receipt, pretty much. Like, thank you for texting such and such show. Thank you, you know. And I get a text back to say that I'm wrong. One of these motherfuckers actually took the time out to say that I was wrong. And it was obvious to me that, you know, for one, the guy didn't even read the forensic report, or even the reports, or the paperwork that was released to the public as far as the grand jury was concerned. There were so many inconsistencies and everything else, and the fact that there were so many inconsistencies was a prime example as to why there should have been a trial when it came to what happened between Mike Brown and Darren Wilson. So it was just interesting to me to go through these different examples of seeing folks' reaction, especially this visceral reaction, right? And it's very interesting to me how much we believe in the criminal justice system divided upon racial lines, man. Like, and I spoke about some of the guys that I work with who were asking me to put myself in the cop shoes, and I basically told those dudes, like, I really can't do that. Like, it's so far removed from my experience with the police to put myself in their shoes. Like, I can't do it. You know, as much as, you know, a lot of folks couldn't necessarily, you know, identify with my experience. Like, you can't, you know, there's a lot of people who look to the police to protect them. I'm one of those individuals who doesn't necessarily look to the police to protect me. I feel as it's my responsibility, and I do, you know, the things that I need to do in order in which to prepare myself to, you know, basically to purport myself in a way that where I'm protected as much as I can be on my own. I don't depend on the police to do that for me. I don't. And, you know, and I don't begrudge anybody who does that, man. I mean, there wasn't a time where I always felt like this, man. I remember when I was a kid, man, and like, I was in fifth grade, and their program, you know, Dare to Keep Kids Off Drugs. And we had, I forget the officer's name. It was a female officer, or a female black officer, who would come to our class every week, and she would tell us about the dangers of drugs and the peer pressure and all of that stuff. Yeah. And it was cool when I was like 10 years old and I was like a kid, and you didn't look at me as a threat. And then until I got older, not even 2 years later, and there's a 12-gauge shotgun to my head telling me to run and see if I could outrun this slug. So, you know, I don't have this sense of security when it comes to the police. And a lot of black people don't necessarily have that sense of security when it comes to the police, man. And I can't put myself in their shoes, unfortunately, man. I wish that circumstances were a bit different to where I could feel as if I could rely on the policeman. But I understand that every instance that I've had with the cops wasn't necessarily to my benefit. Wasn't to my benefit, you know. So yeah, it's been a very interesting couple weeks, man. It's been a trying couple weeks, especially, you know, figuring out those of your friends who are cool, and those of your friends who might not necessarily be of like mind. And that's not to say that everybody has to be of like mind, but at least have to have a sense of middle ground, a sense of understanding as to what folks are thinking, man, and how folks are feeling. And a lot of folks are just kind of crass, man. They don't really give a fuck because it doesn't affect them, you know. And there's that lack of empathy, man. I spoke about this. I was speaking about lack of empathy when it came to street harassment. You know, you know, the fact that a lot of men can't seem to empathize with the fact that a woman might not necessarily want to be bothered while walking up and down the street, and the powerlessness that a black man feels when the police are constantly harassing him while on the streets, man. So this lack of empathy that folks have when it comes to dealing with, you know, black people and their experience with the police, man, like I said, the last time I talked to you guys, man, this shit was a bit disheartening, man, right? And so, you know, after the aftermath of what happened with Mike Brown and Darren Wilson and the non-indictment there, you know, we have, you know, there was rioting in the streets. There was, you know, there were people that were fucking upset, and rightfully so, man. They may not have gone about it the particularly right way. It may not have gone about it in the way that I would have, but they were upset, and they dealt with that you know, their anger in a way that they knew how at that particular moment in time, man. And it was interesting, like, you know, you see, you know, white folks wanting to remind us of Dr. King's message. It's like, dude, look, and I think I said this the last time, man, please don't try to educate me on Dr. King, man. He was so much more than the I Have a Dream speech, man. And even when Dr. King was preaching nonviolence, Dr. King was still gunned down in a suit and tie, being respectable, so to speak, right? And so when we talk about the respectability or respectable and stuff like that, you have Charles Barkley, right? And we talked about Charles Barkley a couple of times, man. I don't look to Charles Barkley for my political commentary, so to speak. I don't necessarily think that Charles Barkley is the brightest dude on the earth when it comes to social issues. But again, you might not necessarily think I'm the brightest dude when it comes to social issues. But at the same time, Charles Barkley said some pretty asinine things, man. One of the things that made it interesting with Charles Barkley was the fact that, you know, it's so obvious that Charles Barkley is so far removed from the common experience that, you know, a lot of the black community is facing, man. And when we talked about when Charles Barkley went on his whole thing of, what I tell my white friends, you know, when he was speaking about, you know, acting black or acting white, if you try to achieve some sort of level of decent education, or if you try to succeed in any sort of way, that there are black people who would, you know, look down upon you or make fun of you or try to get you to act in a way similar to them, to be ignorant, so to speak. He was basically making ignorance synonymous with being black, right? And so I kind of, you look at shit like that and it's like, man, fuck you, man, right? And so then you talk about, well, you know, we got scumbags in our communities, man. We got criminals in our community, and we need the police and everything else. Yes, nobody is saying that black folks don't need, that we don't need police. What black folks are asking for is legitimate policing. They're asking for good policing. They're asking for policemen who protect and serve. You know, the shit that they have right on their cars, they ride around and they parade that around as a fucking banner. That's what black folks are asking for. They're asking for them to be treated with respect when they call the police. They're asking for a prompt response when they call the police. They're asking for the police to take their pleas and their cries seriously. They're asking for the police to do their fucking job without beating everybody's ass. All right, that's what black folks really want, man. Black folks want what white folks want. They want, you know, crime-free communities, man. They want to be able to walk the streets and not worry about people doing shit to them. They want to be able to have their mail show up, or like, you know, it's Christmas time now, so people are having packages delivered to their home. They want to be able to like have their package there by the time they get home and it's still on the porch. You know, that shit's happening everywhere too. That black people don't want the same things, or that black people embrace ignorance, or that black people as a whole are just this monolithic group that don't know how to act outside of the few of us that made it out and made them millions of dollars playing ball. You know what I'm saying? So like, it's weird that people keep going, especially like, say, for instance, like CNN and Fox News and places like that. They keep going to Charles Barkley for his political commentary, not because they necessarily want. I don't think they really give a shit what Charles Barkley says, so to speak. I think it just, Charles Barkley is one of those people who who they parade around to validate their own prejudices. And if you can get a black person, to walk around spouting up these same prejudices against other black people, then you just validate that entire perspective for a nation of white people who have no experience with black people at all. And that's why a lot of folks, especially myself and a lot of people, find what Charles Barkley says problematic, because they give him this platform and they give it to him repeatedly, and they hold him up in the same degree of, say, someone like Al Sharpton or Louis Farrakhan, or say, for instance, a Jeremiah Wright or President Obama or whomever, Michael Eric Dyson. Like, they hold him in the same regard when he isn't as accomplished, he isn't as, on that field, so to speak. He's accomplished as a basketball player, and you respect him, and I even admired his game as a basketball player. I don't give a fuck about Charles Barkley's politics and what Charles Barkley thinks about what's going on in the black community, when Charles Barkley has been so far removed from the black experience in that way. He hasn't experienced it in that way in such a long period of time that he's out of touch. It's not to say that he isn't he's black, he isn't black, or he's an Uncle Tom or whatever. No, Charles Barkley is just simply out of fucking touch. He can't relate. That isn't his experience anymore. That's just what it is, man. So, yeah, that was another interesting thing, man, that came about, man. President Obama met with a lot of protest organizers, and he vowed to spend hundreds of millions of dollars of money on equipping police officers with body cameras. Equipping them with body cameras and what have you. And I, for one, I think I believe it to be a much needed step. One can say that after witnessing what happened with this Eric Garner situation, that it might not mean much, but I, for one, think that it will, for whatever reason, like once it will straighten out quite a bit. I'm not saying that it will totally eradicate everything, but I believe that a lot of the miscommunications with the police and the public, I believe that a lot of the accountability that folks are asking for when it comes to the police can be accomplished with these cameras. I mean, we've seen it time and again where, where police departments have instituted body cameras for their officers, where complaints against their officers have gone down at a pretty startling rate, man. I think it was Rialto, California. They had body cameras put on their police officers, and excessive force complaints went down like 88%. So I believe that it's one of those, it's a tool to be used in order for us to gather this accountability that we want for our, for the police, and when we deal with them and everything else. That's why people pull out their cameras, to keep the police accountable. A lot of times the police don't want you videotaping it. Well, now if it's coming down from the POTUS on down, if this is something that you have to do, then goddamn it, imagine the way that they have to nuance the way that they police. Even some of the more ardent fucked up cops are going to have to nuance the way in which they police. And again, I don't believe that's the only thing it's going to take to straighten these types of things out. But what I do believe is that it's another tool to be used in order to keep these police accountable for the actions in which they go about their job, man. A lot of us, at the end of the day, we want accountability, man. We want accountability. And like, I was on Twitter a bit this week, man, and I was seeing like how that tide turned when the indictment didn't come down for Eric Garner's killer, man. How folks were saying, well, fuck those damn body cameras, because we saw Eric Garner get killed and there was no indictment there either. But you can't throw out the fucking bathwater you can't throw out the fucking whole thing, man. You just can't. You can't let this one particular case throw out the tools that can be used to prevent another case from happening because we're upset at this particular moment right now. And trust me, I'm just as upset as every motherfucking body else when it comes to the fact that we can watch a man die on fucking videotape and nobody gets held accountable for it. Okay. I'm with you on to prevent another case like this from happening again. And so when it comes to Tyrone, be quiet. Shut up. Shut up. Be quiet. Damn dog. But anyway, anyway, when it comes to this, man, like we need body cameras, right? We need citizen review boards, right? We need to hold these police accountable for what they do in the communities in which they police. You know, I don't know. Honestly, I don't have the answer to everything. I don't. I wish I did. But to me, it seemed counterintuitive for us to not only like ask for the cameras in one instance where we have so much ambiguity and so much nuance and so much of the unknown when it came to what exactly happened with Mike Brown and Darren Wilson, to then say, fuck these damn cameras as soon as we see the indictment didn't come down for Eric Garner. So, yeah, it's a sad situation, man. It's one of those. It makes you weary, man. It makes you weary, and it opens up a lot of folks' eyes, man, when it comes to, race relations. We are a pretty divided country at this particular moment in time, man. I can't remember a time where we weren't at. Well, I can. O.J. Simpson was a pretty divisive time in the United States. Rodney King verdicts was a pretty divisive time in the United States. The election, like the first election of Barack Obama, was a pretty time in these United States, man. The fact that folks were believing that we lived in a post-racial society because of the election of Barack Obama have gotten a rude awakening when it comes to these things, man. You look at any comment section now, and it's nasty. It's nasty all day long, man. Like no matter what. And I try to avoid a lot of comment sections during these trials, these non-trials, these non-indictments. I try to avoid a lot of the conversations that were had because I knew I was going to get upset. I knew I was going to say a lot of shit. And I didn't just for my own sanity, man. And even now, like talking about it now, there's a lot of things that just simply don't make sense to me. That I don't think they will ever make sense. And they don't make sense to a lot of people who, I guess, pride themselves on using logic, and yeah, man, it's a sad day, or it's a sad time for the country when you have an Eric Garner or the killer of Eric Garner walk away scot-free, when you have Darren Wilson walk away scot-free and get money for what he did. Yeah, man. Yeah, it's just a real fucked up time in America. Yeah. And I was listening to the Black Guy Who Tips earlier today, man. I think they were doing the feedback show earlier today, and Rob was talking about the fact that it's so much money to be made off of the way that they police the Black community that they don't really have much incentive to change it up. And I believe that. I'm not much of a conspiratorial person either, but I do believe that because of the way that the prison system is set up, because you have so many communities, so many small towns across this country that are benefiting, and their lifeblood is the prison in that little town, man. That's where everybody works. That's the industry there. Because you have so many private entities with their hands in the prisons, because we've already seen judges, using their position to pipeline kids to the prison system. Yeah, man. Yeah, it's a lot of different things to attribute the way that our community is policed, and the way that folks look at how we are to be policed, I guess. Yeah, it's just a real fucked up time. Just a real fucked up time. And yeah, I mean, I only wish, man. My biggest thing is that, like, we can all talk about Dr. King's dream and shit like that, but at the end of the day, man, I just kind of want to be able to live that at one point. Like, and I believe that's probably why it was a dream of Dr. King's. because I believe towards the end, Dr. King pretty much realized that, this dream that he had would be, we made a lot of strides towards it, but it's damn near unattainable. Even in the election of, say, a black president, we're still being shown that, sometimes your black lives don't necessarily matter in the grand scheme of things until you're making shit inconvenient for white folks. So, yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here, man. I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. But before I get out of here, of course, I gotta let you guys know how you can get in touch with me here at the Spann Report Podcast and let your voice be heard. You can hit me up at the Spann Report hotline at area code 313-288-0485. That's area code 313-288-0485. Hit me up with those voicemail messages. I won't be able to, at least at this particular moment in time, I won't be able to respond to those live, but those responses will be on the Spann Report podcast. You'll be able to listen to those responses on the Spann Report podcast, at least until I get my, my equipment and shit like that together. Also, you can hit me up on the email. My email is feedback@thespannreport.com. That's feedback@thespannreport.com. Leave those emails, and I will read those emails and respond to those emails here on the show. Also, you can go to thespannreport.com, and everything you need as far as the Spann Report is concerned is available at thespannreport.com. So check out the website. You can watch this video along with all of the other episodes of these, or at least some of the newer episodes, because I just started doing these shows live. But you can watch this episode along with other Spann TV videos that I've done. You can also check out every podcast. They're available there. You can check out the guest appearances that I've had on other shows, man. Go to the Spann Report podcast or go to the spannreport.com and check out everything there. That's where you go for all of your Spann Report needs. And of course, you can chop it up with me on Twitter and Instagram. My name on both of those platforms, of course, is Mr._Spann, man. But I got to get out of here, man. Spend some time with my daughter, man. We're gonna kick it this weekend. So until next time, fam, I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.